What's up, guys? Welcome back to our series on the gnarly stories of Scripture. Last week we talked about Joseph and his brothers, and this week we're going to be talking about the story of Moses and the Red Sea. So I want you guys to think in your head of a time when you were stuck, a time when it seemed like you couldn't go anywhere in whatever the circumstance is, whether it seems like a place, like you're driving directions and you get to a T, or you are mentally trying to solve something and you can't figure it out, or even like when like you think you have a good idea and you're working on it and it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere and you just feel stuck. You know? This happened for me several times in my life, but one of the things that I key remember on this was actually coming up with this Bible study series. So originally, we had talked about doing a series on the book of Ephesians, and we were going through the book of Ephesians and trying to find the themes of it and trying to figure out what to do. But no matter how much time I poured into trying to figure out how to make this work, it wouldn't move forward. And I was really confused by this because I was like, how can something that I want to teach you guys be the problem here? And so I stopped for a moment and I sat down at my desk and I just started asking God, what do you want me to teach? What do you want me to teach? What do you want me to teach? I asked this over several days as I was trying to figure out what to do. And when crunch time came, I heard this thought in my head say, well, why don't you ask the kids what they want to know? So I was talking to a kid at the counter and I was like, hey, what do you want to learn? And he was like, oh, I want to learn about this Bible story. And he didn't get all the details quite right. And I was like, okay. Then I asked another kid while I was skating, I was like, hey, we're doing a new Bible study series. What do you want to learn? And he was like, oh, this thing. And he didn't like have all the pieces together. And what I found was there was this understanding going around that we thought you guys had basics understanding of these stories in Scripture. But it turns out that a lot of you had never heard some of these. So that became the Bible study series, hence what we're doing now. So in a similar way, Moses was this chosen leader from God, and he is trying to move the Israelites out of Egypt. They've just dealt with the 10 plagues, which if you don't know what those are, you can go back and read that in Exodus like 9 through 12 or something. These plagues were sent by God to Pharaoh to show his power, and each one of these plagues dealt with a different belief that the Egyptians had would be protecting them, and it proved wrong. And finally, the last one was the killing of the firstborn. After this happened, Pharaoh threw the last straw and said, go, get out, go. So these Israelites are traveling out of Egypt with Moses, and they come to the Red Sea. And on one side is mountains, on the other side is mountains, and so they decide to make camp. Now, in the midst of this, Pharaoh realizes all the workers that he has lost. He realizes in Exodus 13 how he just lost all these people who were building this great kingdom for him, and he decides to go after them. So now that they are encamped on the Red Sea, they're kind of easy targets, and they see the chariots coming in the distance, And they're like, oh no, what do we do? And Moses tells them to trust God and that God would take care of the scenario. So let's pick up here in chapter 14 verses 10 through 22. This is what it says. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there was the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us here into the desert to die? What have you done bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve in Egypt than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see here today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell your Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians and make them go in after you. I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, and through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's armies, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved in from the front and stood behind them, coming between them and the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all the night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind, and it turned into dry land. The Israelites went through the sea on dry ground. The waters were divided, with all the water walls on the left and on the right. So, talk about something crazy, right? Moses told the people they need only to be still and rely on God. Just like in my scenario with the story I gave, and I'm sure with some of your scenarios with situations where you were stuck, if we be still before God and we just ask Him, the solution often comes. And so this story always makes me wonder what all that might have looked like. What would it have been like to see two huge walls of water on either side of the Great Sea and dry land underfoot? I'm truly blown away by God's power in some of these stories, and this is no exception. God showed His great power so the Israelites would know who they follow and why. So I want to challenge you guys through this story that when you feel stuck, when you feel like you don't know where to go, do what Moses said. Be still and ask God. And He will show you where to go. He will part the Red Sea of your life so that you can continue to do what He needs you to do. Have a great week, guys.